Thanks everyone for joining us today for a webinar. We appreciate you making the time. This is our bi-monthly series, Cybersecurity Best Practices, and today we are talking about how ransomware as a service is changing the game and how school districts can protect themselves. My name is Daniel Eickhoff. I'm a K-12 cybersecurity specialist here at Securus 360, and we are actually 100% focused on working with school districts, and we help them with their cybersecurity operations. We offer a ton of different services.
And my name's Jeff Talibaum. I'm a senior solutions engineer at Securus 360.
Thanks, Jeff. Looking forward to your part of the more technical nature. So this very much sounds like hyperbole, but it is unfortunately very true. We are tracking a bunch of incidents with school districts from coast to coast, and this is by no means all the incidents happening. That's just the ones we're tracking. And this is an interactive map available on our website, and you can click these little markers and get information on the attacks and get a little news reports and things like that. But we are seeing how attacks are becoming much more frequent in the last 1-2 years, and the complexity, the sophistication of attacks is also increasing quite a bit. Even large districts like Los Angeles, USD here in California, second largest district in the nation, a little bit over a year ago, were hit and breached. The hackers are after children's data, and school districts have a lot of sensitive information, which of course makes them prime targets. And once the data is out, it's devastating for those families. Prince George's County Public Schools is a good example. The information here, so full names, social security numbers, financial account information of over 100,000 people was leaked by Resida on their leak site. Minneapolis Public Schools is another example. This is by Medusa, and we'll talk about Medusa a little bit in more detail in a minute, but they were asking $1 million in ransom, and to their credit, Minneapolis Public Schools did not pay, but unfortunately, promptly, Medusa released all that information on the dark web, which of course is not good. Major fallout there in the community. This is an interesting example. Naturally, school districts, as do other types of victims in other industries, they try to slow walk the release of information about the breach, the nature of the breach, the scope, and all that, and makes perfect sense from a cybersecurity perspective as well as a public relations perspective. But of course, the new breed of cyber criminals and ransomware gangs do not want to play along with it. So they figured out how to put more pressure on their victims. And in case of Bluefield University, and this is Avis Locker, they ended up hijacking the university's emergency alert system called RAM Alert, and they started sending texts to the students and the parents directly. And they were saying things like, hey, this is Avis Locker ransomware. We stole 1.2 terabytes of data from your university. We have admissions data of thousands of students. We're going to leak it on the dark web. Don't let the university lie to you about the severity of the attack. And then to prove their point, they linked to their leak site where they were publishing samples of the data they stole. And then they said, talk to the media. So these new ransomware gangs are really aggressive, really sophisticated the way they leverage the data they have and put pressure on their victims. Different tons of studies out there, different sets of data numbers, but all show that the education space is the #1 targeted industry in the US right now and has been for a little while. So in the last 2 years, what we've been seeing a change, a shift in the way these ransomware gangs are operating, and they have regrouped and reinvented themselves, or entered the ransomware as a service stage or model, and they've become much more organized and very commercialized. And existing gangs have restructured as RAS operators. Others have sold their technologies, and we talk about one of them later. And then, they've sold that to new emerging RAS groups. And some of the larger RAS operators have up to 100 affiliates. These are 100 smaller gangs that license the technology of, for example, Medusa or Lockbit or Vice Society, and then they perform their own attacks, and they pay a license fee of 20 to 30% to the RAS operator to use the platform, the technology, and the brand. And these RAS operators now, they have full-on like marketing teams, recruiting teams. They have a victim support staff, which is cynical. It's basically victims negotiations. They call it victim support. They have development teams, of course. They operate out of commercial business real estate. And double extortion is the norm now. So remember when, 5, 10, 15 years ago in ransomware 1.0, it was all about encrypting the data, the systems, and then the victim would pay the ransom to get that decryption key, hopefully. And then, of course, victims got smart, started restoring their systems, their data from backups, and not pay. And then, of course, ransomware gangs responded and said, hey, no problem, guys, we get wiser too. And they started exfiltrating, meaning stealing the data in addition to encrypting it. So now they had leverage again and said, hey, if you don't pay up, even though you restored your data, but we'll release it and put pressure on them this way. So this is what they're still doing, but exfiltration has really become the #1 driver in this. And another interesting example of how they are really operating like legitimate businesses is the way they have business partners and suppliers. For example, initial access is a good example. So RAS operators, they don't want to spend time and effort on investigating their victims and then gain initial, like the infiltration part to gain initial access. They don't want to deal with it. So they work with other groups or individuals who focus and specialize on infiltrating these victims, but then they don't exploit that access themselves. They sell it to the ransomware as a service operators, either directly or through initial access brokers. RAS operators have bug bounty programs, so they have essentially vulnerability hunters that, again, are smaller groups or individuals who are looking for vulnerabilities and then selling that information to the RAS operators, who then pass it on to their affiliates so they can exploit it and gain access to these targets. And they have job ads out on the dark web. This is Avis looking for affiliates, and they are talking about the features of their platform, their technology: fast multi-threaded encryption, fail-proof, right? Low detection rate. So they say, hey, come with us. We have great product. Become an affiliate. Bugatti, a Russian based smaller group, but same thing. Talking about their platform. They are showing sample payments to their affiliates to attract them. Or in this case, Avis is looking for pen testers. These are the vulnerability hunters I mentioned a minute ago, and they're looking for access brokers. They're saying, hey, we're willing to pay for data, for access data, and then we give that to our affiliates so they can just hit them all quickly. So it's a really scalable operation. What does this mean for school districts? Before, we had a number of ransomware gangs, and they could all target only a certain number of victims. And typically they kind of focused on, fewer victims at the time. They focused on larger victims. It was more a deliberate process. Now we have RAS operators, which have 20, 50, up to 100 of these affiliates who all target their number of victims. So now we just multiplied the number of attackers by tens or 100, and the number of attacks as well. So gangs now, as a RAS, so Medusa RAS, the Medusa 3.0 or Lockbit 3.0, now they can target hundreds of school districts simultaneously, randomly, indiscriminately. They cast a wide net. Other gangs, for example, Vice Society, they are still targeting school districts specifically for different reasons. They're data rich and very susceptible to pressure because of the nature of that data. And unfortunately, often they're vulnerable in terms of cybersecurity protection. So that means at the end of the day that any district nowadays, regardless of their size or the location, are much more likely to be attacked today than they were a year ago or 2 years ago. It has changed dramatically. And districts are finding out the hard way that being smaller or a lower profile than their shiny, city district next door does not mean they won't be attacked. 10 years ago, they might have been, or 5 years ago, they might have been able to hide in the herd and hope that those few gangs target the larger districts. Now, wide net is being cast, indiscriminately attacking all the districts, and eventually the districts with less protection are the ones getting breached. These are the key players. Lockbit, number one player. Lockbit 3.0, talked about that. Vice Society, number two, and they target education. So education is the most targeted space for Vice Society. Avis, always been a good, reliable player in the market. Hive is a good example because they got shut down by a multinational cyber crime task force with the FBI and several European countries, and shut down Hive and put so much pressure on them that they decided, that the leaders decided to shut the operations down and sell their technology to Hunters International. So Hunters International emerged as a new player using Hive technology. And then, of course, Medusa, big player in the education. Their number two target is the education space. Let's talk about Medusa a little bit. And these, not to be confused with the original Medusa locker. So this is the revamped Medusa RAS group. They're very active, and in less than a week, in 4 days, just before Christmas, they took down 3 school districts. And to show how randomly and how they just indiscriminately target all the sizes, we look at the 3 districts that were breached that week. One had 3 schools, the other one had 9 schools, and the third one had 31 or 32 schools. So completely different shapes and sizes. And Medusa actually predominantly uses vulnerabilities. So they exploit unpatched vulnerabilities, basically, that they do purchase from initial access brokers and from those vulnerability hunters. But this is the actual copy of the actual ransom note that these districts received, and we actually were in contact with one of those just a few months before they were breached by Medusa, and we had a conversation, said, hey, there's many things we can do and we can help you. And they said, no, thank you. We feel properly protected. Unfortunately, and it gives me no joy to say that, but obviously they miscalculated. I don't know at the end of the day if they overestimated their own level of protection or if they underestimated the threat, but they ended up getting breached. And this is how Medusa communicates with the victims and their customers who are willing to pay for that information. So the Medusa media team is running this blog, and this is actually, there's templates. So each affiliate has access to this platform, and they can very quickly and easily upload the information for each of their individual victims. And then it shows up like this. This is one of the 3 districts we were just talking about, just before Christmas here last year. And this is not the big one, because for the large district in California, they were asking for multi-million-dollar ransom. This must be the 9 school district where they were asking $600,000 in ransom. The district, so they're sending this link to this blog to the victim, and they can see here, the school district can see they have 14 days to pay up. And down here, you see how many interesting parties that want to buy this data have looked at this. And this is basically when we shop for a car and we go on CarMax or Auto Trader and we look at a car and it says, oh, 66 other shoppers have looked at this car recently. So it puts additional pressure on me to pull the trigger. So this is how it's communicated. This down here is just another victim, not a school district. But then the school district clicks here, and then they go in here, and then they see their options. So again, this is the school district with the description, and they have different options to get out of this situation. If they need more time to come up with the 600 grand, they can add 1 day of time. They can buy a day for $10,000, or they can pay $600,000 to delete the data on Medusa's servers or download the data. So extremely sophisticated and effective platform to manage this all. Quick note on a different aspect of all this, which is to showcase how these RAS operators are not only operating like a legitimate business, but have similar interests and strategies, because this happened only recently, where again a multinational cybercrime task force shut down or gained access to the Lockbit systems temporarily, but they did get in, and they took over the Lockbit website, and they put that announcement on the site saying this is under control of law enforcement. And it was a great success, awesome. And of course, they also the different governments touted that, in press releases through the regular media. But then that's the key part. Lockbit came back a few days later. Their leak site and their platform was back up. Turns out they restored it, just like any other company, from backups. But importantly, the leader of Lockbit went public with a number of statements, and they said, yes, it was my responsibility or irresponsibility. We overlooked a certain vulnerability. The FBI or that law enforcement group took advantage of it. However, we fixed it. We kicked them back out. We recovered our system. We fixed the vulnerability, and we back up and stronger than ever. And the important part is they have to protect, just like a private business or any legitimate business, private or public, they need to protect their brand. They need to protect the perception of the quality of their technology. Otherwise, they lose customers, which for them are their 100 affiliates. So if their affiliates start thinking, oh, Lockbit is not a legitimate business partner, then they switch over to Medusa. So they are operating and thinking and acting like a legitimate business. So with that, they're really dynamic. Attacks went through the roof. They're very aggressive, but there's a ton of different things, solutions, tools, best practices that school districts can take and can implement to protect themselves. And Jeff is going to go into some detail here.
All right. Thanks, Daniel. Lots of great information on the threats that school districts are facing. So the stages of a ransomware attack, it always begins with a reconnaissance phase or discovery phase. It's just basically information gathering. They don't show the boring part in the movies with some guys like, "Hey, I'm in." There's always research is always has to come first. They have to know how to breach your infrastructure before. And that initial access can happen a number of ways, whether that's stolen credentials, social engineering, some vulnerability that they happen to get privy to that the school district had, malware, brute forcing, or as Daniel alluded to earlier, purchasing from an initial access broker. They didn't want to compromise it themselves. They wanted to sell that to someone else to have them compromise the school. Once the attackers are in there, to be honest, the initial point of access is very rarely the intended target. They're looking for things like domain controllers or possibly in your guys' case, a student information system if that's hosted on-prem. Once they have that point of access, they're moving laterally in the network, trying to get to just see what else they can compromise. Because again, the initial access is usually something that's kind of low-hanging fruit, like maybe a IP camera or printer. Those are a bit notorious for vulnerabilities. Once they are able to get at their intended target, that pot of gold they're seeking, they then exfiltrate that data. And again, as Daniel alluded to, once that data is out there, you really can't get it back. It's more than likely going to be leaked at that point, whether you pay or not. But that, of course, depends on the ransomware group. We advise against not paying under any circumstance. And lastly, they're going to try to cover their tracks. Just like any other criminal committing a bad act, they're going to try to clean up after themselves. They don't want to get caught. And just one real world example that we've seen is, for instance, an Office 365 account getting compromised and then trying to delete the phishing emails that they're sending from the sent box. That way they can try to cover their tracks that way and make it harder for the user to see that they've been compromised. And we'll talk a little more about intrusion prevention and detection and mitigation on the next slide here. So really data exfiltration, that's a huge concern. The intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems are some solid ways you can prevent that. Keep in mind that the intrusion detection system is just going to kind of monitor and alert on it. The intrusion prevention system will take direct action in real time if those rules are violated and there's anomalous activity that's detected. And of course, there's all types of security layers that you need in place. Firewall and group policy rules are certainly crucial. These can include, but are certainly not limited to, web filtering with domain blacklisting and whitelisting, restricting unused outbound ports, restricting countries, app whitelisting as well. Email filtering, absolutely critical. To be honest, unfortunately, no email filtering solution out there is perfect, but ideally you want to stop that malicious link or attachment from getting in the user's inbox at all. It's a great way to kind of proactively reduce your attack surface there. MFA in as many places as you can have it, and really just adhering to principle of least privilege. If users don't only need to access certain things like web or email, there's no reason they should be able to talk to other VLANs, especially if they have Active Directory infrastructure on there. Not giving any users any more access than they actually need to do what they need to do. And we really can't stress the importance enough of cybersecurity awareness training, because the unfortunate reality is the more users that you have, the more of an attack surface that you have. Users are unfortunately a vulnerability as well. We have to think of it that way. And the more users you have, the more accounts can be compromised. And so the more people that you have that are aware of the sneaky tactics that these cyber criminals leverage, the more you'll have that will stop and think before they click the link. And so there's some other things you could do as well. I really want to stress the importance of proper VLAN segmentation, because this is one that we do unfortunately see quite a lot, where school districts, they may have their network segregated into, let's just say, staff and students and maybe system administrators, things like that. However, there's not always firewall rules in between them. Segmenting them, better than nothing, certainly, but it's still leaving holes for criminals to move laterally in your network if those VLANs are not segmented off with inter-VLAN firewall rules. Decommissioning old systems, this is a really big one, and this is one of the many reasons that we run vulnerability scans. We actually came across one the other day where customers said, "Hey, we thought we shut that down," and the vulnerability scan caught it. They were able to retire that, and then they had one less listening port on their network, and reducing the attack surface. Staying up to date with OS and browser patching. Keep in mind your Outlook or your email app is going to, and your browser as well, are very much vehicles for ransomware. You want to keep those as updated as you possibly can. And really, to have true peace of mind, you want an MXDR solution, Managed Extended Detection and Response, which at least should include an EDR. EDR is very, very important for stopping malicious processes from executing. And you really can't just look at endpoint at just on-prem anymore. You got to look at cloud. Everyone's kind of got a mixed environment. And you got to look at the network and security devices as well, the traffic going through those. Aggregate those to a SIM with machine learning rules, and have that live monitored by a security operations center, a SOC team. There's just too many alerts for even medium teams these days to really kind of comb through. A SOC team is pretty necessary in this day and age.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, there's a lot. So there's a lot of different things that school districts can do to make sure they are properly protected and do not fall victim to one of those many attacks. The problem is with the nature of the unique challenges that school districts are facing. We're talking to school districts all day long, every day, and we see a lot of districts or schools that do not deploy and utilize many of those. Most of them have antivirus, then they have email filtering for smaller districts provided by the county, their firewalls, but that's not enough today. Maybe that was enough 10 years ago, but definitely not today. And then other districts, typically maybe a little bit larger district, or for some reason they have a larger team, a little bit bigger budget, they have an EDR solution in place, but typically it's not managed, which means that a smaller team, they're busy with their day-to-day stuff. They cannot chase these alerts all day. Some districts try to implement MFA, in as many places as possible. Some of them run vulnerability scans every once in a while, but then sometimes they run them, but often they don't have the bandwidth to actually act on them. So they don't manage to then prioritize and remediate critical vulnerabilities, and then network segmentations, security awareness training still does not really provide the level of protection that is necessary, particularly based on the fact that you don't have really the manpower. Often many districts don't have the manpower to manage these. So what we recommend is and these to partner with the MXDR, with the MDR, with the managed service provider, and that's all they do. They can monitor all your devices, including cloud and users, and all the things that Jeff talked about. They can do that 24/7. They leverage machine learning algorithms, AI. They can set traps for intruders. They can help you with pen testing, with incident response planning, with remediating attacks or threats in off hours, on the weekend or a holiday. Something happens, the district's team is not available. The right partner can quote unquote dial in remotely and mitigate the situation. Cyber warranties are out there, which go a long way with school districts, adding that additional financial level of protection on top of the cybersecurity technical protection. So a lot of different services that we recommend school districts look into to really get the peace of mind and the protection that they really need today. This is just a picture, I love this, of our platform multi-vector on the left, integrated platform with all the managed services down here. And then of course we crunch all the data through the SIEM, through machine learning. We ingest all the threat intelligence from all the different sources. And then of course at the end, the SOC team jumps on any issues and responds to them and works with the clients. So let's do the questions. We actually have a couple, so feel free to. We still have a couple minutes. I know we're slightly over already. So we take just a couple more minutes to answer your questions. If you have any other questions, put them through the Q&A feature. Question number 1: why are ransomware gangs targeting the education space over, for example, banks or manufacturers or telecom companies?
As Daniel was alluding to, the MO, so to speak, of bad actors is to cast a wide net and see who bites. And school districts, unfortunately, they have a lot of publicly available information, names, emails of teachers and staff. The reality is that just leaves them vulnerable to attacks like phishing or spear phishing, just because of the amount of public information that's out there. It makes them very attractive targets. So you couple that with limited cybersecurity budgets, and those factors together just lead to a higher probability of a successful attack on a school. That's why we're seeing that. And then of course you have gangs like Vice Society, which are going to target schools a little more directly.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Next question. What are some of the most common indicators of compromise for schools that are hit by ransomware?
So they definitely vary. They can come from on-prem or cloud, but probably the most common one is going to be compromised accounts. That's certainly a big one, because phishing is a very common form of attack. They basically, attackers will use schools as basically a launch pad for ransomware gangs, and being able to detect things like anonymous login or anomalous login, or failed login attempts. Those are certainly ones, especially if it's an unapproved foreign country login from a country you're not expecting. Impossible travel is a rule that we've actually seen come through, where if there's a concurrent logon session from, let's just say, the US and then someplace like Russia, someone's not going to be logging in those two locations at the same time. Or even if it's within a small parameter, they log in from one country and a few seconds later they log into another. That's a bit of a red flag that will certainly be popped. Compromised accounts, I would say, are probably the biggest one there.
Okay. Last question, and Jeff, I only see one more question. Let me know if there's any other questions coming in that you see that I might have missed. Why do you focus on K-12? Okay, I'll take that one, Jeff. So we do, because well, for starters, the K-12 space is the #1 attacked industry, and school districts have unique challenges that they are faced with that are often overlooked by the big box cybersecurity vendors. And we are able to specialize in offering a platform and services that can reduce the burden on these IT teams by taking these cybersecurity tasks off their plate. We are able to customize our solution to work with different districts, limited budgets, and so we can help these IT teams free up their time so they can focus on their core IT responsibilities or strategic projects, and they still have the peace of mind of knowing that their network is protected 24/7 by a group, like us, who that's all we do. So yeah, and we love working with only with school districts. It's all we do. We love it. So no more questions, looks like. So quick housekeeping note: next webinar is in 2 months, May 23rd. we'll be talking about disaster recovery strategy and planning. We'll have Francisco Gillette from Paragon Software Group on as an expert on that, and he'll talk to us about what to do and what not to do when it comes to disaster recovery planning. So hope to see you there. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I know you guys are busy. Thanks for taking the time. If you have any questions, either for Jeff, his information is on there, or you can always contact me. You probably have received an email from me in the past. Feel free to reach out. Happy to discuss any question, any type of service, and see if we can help. Thanks much.
Thanks, everyone.